Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. Let's wait a couple of moments to allow all the attendees to join this Zoom webinar. This is a webinar to launch the Policy Handbook on Financial Education in the Workplace, developed by the OECD International Network on Financial Education. It's great to have so many of you here today. I see that there are many attendees still joining, so let's wait a few seconds. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Florent Messi, who is the head of the Consumer Finance, Insurance and Pensions divisions at the OECD, and who is also the executive secretary of the OECD INFE network. She will deliver opening remarks. Florent, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chiara, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know that many of you are actually waking up very early or perhaps late at night to join us. So as you know, this is the launch of a policy handbook on financial education in the workplace, which the OECD, INFE, and the whole INFE, I should say, members have been working on for the last years. So we are very happy to welcome over 300 participants today, as well as very esteemed speakers from Canada, Hong Kong, China, Netherlands, New Zealand, Peru, Portugal, the UK, and the US. And of course, we have our keynote speaker, Professor Anna Maria Lusardi, also joining us today. Of course, this participation is global, and it's certainly a testimony to the relevance of this topic at global level. The topic is, I would say, even more relevant today as labor market, financial market, and the whole society are changing, and there are many pressures coming first from the COVID-19 pandemic, the increasing digitalization, inflation, difficult economic and political situation. All of this have implication into financial education in general, and especially for financial education in the workplace. As I mentioned, the OECD and its International Network on Financial Education have long recognized the importance of financial education in the workplace and the need to focus on financial education needs of adults and employees. For example, the OECD recommendation on financial literacy acknowledges the role of workplace and employers. Typically, the recommendation says that policymakers have to establish transparent coordination and governance mechanisms when establishing and implementing their national strategy for financial education. This includes involving relevant private and not-for-profit stakeholders to the extent possible, for example, employers. Additionally, the recommendation recognizes that workplaces are an environment that can be conducive to learning and are likely to support effective delivery of financial literacy programs. Financial education in the workplace was particularly in the spotlight within the OECD INFE since 1918. Actually, a specific working group has been created back in 2018 to really focus on financial education in the workplace, and public authorities have continuously discussed the needs for financial education to happen in the workplace, but also the challenges and the motivation for implementing financial education in an effective way. The policy handbook is a result of this work, of the work and the discussion of this group, and particularly of a survey that was circulated amongst the OECD INFE membership back in 2018. We've also conducted extensive research into financial education in the workplace in order to develop this policy handbook. Now, the policy handbook, and I'd like to spend a few minutes on that, is actually discussing a number of issues. And first, it really focuses on the rationale for the development and implementation of financial education in the workplace, also highlighting potential challenges and needs. It then goes into proposing policy suggestions for policymakers and other stakeholders, including employers, of course, based on current practices and lessons learned. It provides really an overview of international good practices in designing and delivering financial education in the workplace based on the best practice, the evidence, and research. The policy handbook is concluding by setting out some policy suggestions in order to ensure that financial education in the workplace is not only happening, but that it is effective. Now, turning to today's agenda, we will delve more into some of the issues that are touched upon in the Policy Handbook, in particular, first focusing on the rationale. Session 1 today and our keynote speech by Anna-Maria Lusardi will provide some insight into the rationale and benefits of providing financial education in the workplace, including the fact that workplace is an effective channel to reach a wide audience of adults and households and in their financial decision, including those that may be vulnerable or under financial stress. Second, a few issues, or I should say figures, to illustrate the relevance of financial education in the workplace. Financial or money matters and challenges are a source of stress for 54% of respondents to an employee's surveys in the US. In the New Zealand, then, 46% of employees have reported feeling stressed owing to their financial situation. So this research showed that workplace financial education can help employees to improve their level of financial literacy and financial well-being. Employers are well placed to provide financial education, even if their involvement may be challenging, especially for smaller companies and in certain industries. In spite of these challenges, providing financial education to employees can be beneficial for employers and their companies by increasing employee satisfaction, motivation, sense of loyalty, and ultimately productivity. In terms of the current practice and policy suggestion, Session 1 will look at the role of policymakers in supporting the provision of financial education in the workplace, not only by giving the example and providing financial education directly to their own staff, but also in some cases indirectly by providing resources to private companies in their countries, thereby addressing challenges and alleviating resources constraints on the side of especially small employers. We will hear in that sense from Canada, Hong Kong, China, and the Netherlands, and of course, our friend from Portugal will be moderating that session. Now, thirdly, on the agenda, the way forward. As I've mentioned at the beginning, workplaces are changing due to the COVID-19 pandemic and to longer-term trends such as digitalization, for example. This has implication for financial education in the workplace, creating new challenges, but also new opportunities. Session 2 will be an opportunity to have a discussion among policymakers and employers about how the COVID-19 pandemic, digitalization, and other trends are shaping the motivation, content, and delivery methods of financial education in the workplace. We will hear the experience there of New Zealand, Peru, UK, the US, as well as the OECD. Without further ado, let us hear more about the policy handbook itself first, and then have a discussion on how to make sure that it is used and being implemented. I wish you all a very good discussion and a productive event. Thank you very much. Back to you, Chiara.
Thank you very much, Florent. And let me now give the floor to our colleague, Sona Lalayan, who is the author of this policy handbook. She will give you an overview of the main insights and policy suggestions in the policy handbook before we turn to direct country experiences. Please, Sona, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Florent. Thank you, Chiara. Now I will share my screen. You can see my screen, right? So it is my pleasure to present the Policy Handbook on Financial Education in the Workplace today. So this is an extensive document enriched with examples and case studies from the OECD INFE members, and I will try to summarize the main ideas in 15 minutes. But for more detailed information, I encourage you to read the document. So as Florent has mentioned already, the Policy Handbook is developed in the context of the work of the OECD International Network of Financial Education. And I would like to use this opportunity to thank the members of the OECD INFE and also the dedicated working group for their valuable input and contributions to the development of this Policy Handbook. This document can be described as a tool to help to think about key issues when designing workplace financial education, and it is aimed at policymakers, practitioners, employers, and financial education providers who are interested in developing and implementing workplace financial education programs. It focuses primarily on the workplace and the role of employers, which are the most commonly used channels for providing financial education to employees. At the same time, it describes other means of delivering financial education to employees, including digital tools, which are extremely relevant since COVID-19 pandemic. Brief overview about the content of the policy handbook, which is structured around 3 sections. The first one is the rationale. Second one, it describes the status of financial education for employees in the OECD INFE member countries and economies. And third one, it proposed suggested approaches to developing and implementing financial education in a workplace. I will go very quickly on the rationale because in our next sessions we will hear more about this, and also Professor Anna Maria Lusardi will talk about the growing need for financial education in the workplace. Just to say that this is important for policymakers because it's a way to reach a large number of household decision makers and also adults who spend the majority of their time at the workplace. It's also a way to provide a timely financial education and use teachable moments, for example, when an employee receives its first salary or starts planning for its retirement. And also a way to identify and reach vulnerable groups in countries and also in the workplaces. As Moran already mentioned, the financial stress is a common anxiety among employees, and which can have a negative impact on physical and mental well-being of the employees, and also can have a negative implication on working relationship and productivity at work. So that's why financial education in the workplace can be a way to affect on financial decision of employees and improve their financial well-being. This is also beneficial for employers because they can benefit from the healthier and more motivated workforce, and they can have more increased employee satisfaction, improved reputation as a preferred employees, which can potentially lead to a competitive advantage. Despite the evidence of potential benefits, the creation and delivery of financial education in the workplace is not without challenges. The experience of the OECD INFE members shows a variety of factors that limit employers' willingness to provide financial education in the workplace, and also challenges that limit employees' take up. For example, employers may lack to see the need and business case for improving financial literacy levels of employees. They may also fail to see the negative impact of employees' financial stress on the firm. They may prioritize higher economic performance over financial well-being of employees. And also they may lack of information and capacity regarding what to teach and how to start. It can be also costly, especially for smaller companies. And then some companies may find difficult to engage employees in time-consuming programs. Other factors, such as logistics and infrastructure, can be also a barrier. From employees' perspective, they may not be motivated because they may lack of interest. They may also fail to see the benefits of participating in such programs. They may also lack of time and also have some competing priorities during working hours. And they may also feel ashamed to discuss financial programs with their colleagues and employers, and sometimes having also the fear of revealing their problems, a fear of losing job or being judged. In this section, we describe the policy solutions that many countries and economies have adopted to elevate the status of financial education in the workplace, and it includes examples and case studies of the OECD INFE members. And in the next session, we will hear about detailed examples and case studies from our guests of the OECD, from our guest policymakers from the OECD INFE countries and economies. And first, it looks at preparatory steps in designing financial education in the workplace, such as conducting surveys on the financial behavior and financial stress of employees, for example, by private institutions or private sectors. Then it describes how OECD INFE members consider financial education in the workplace as part of an holistic approach, by conducting them as part of national strategies. And indeed, some countries explicitly integrate employees or workers as a vulnerable target group in their national strategies, and define workplaces as a relevant channel for financial education. It also describes specific financial education programs in the workplace and for employees, promoted, designed, and implemented by many governments, public authorities, non-for-profit organizations, and private sector. And it includes the case studies from many countries, and the list you can see in this slide. Programs, it's important to mention that programs vary from one country to another, depending on the context, cultural specificities, also from the objective of the project, and also size of type of organization where the project is implemented. Many OECD INFE members have developed, for example, learning programs and guidance for employers in order to assist them in introducing financial education in a workplace. For example, by providing free resources, materials, and guidance for employers, how to implement, and also teaching materials that they can use. And also they supported the business case, such as organizing events and webinars, and meeting with employers to discuss this issue. And also, many programs are implemented for employers directly, for example, through digital learning platform and other digital tools that can be accessible to employees and can be used also by employers. Many policymakers organize, or other organizations organize trainings, webinars, or for employees. They offer personalized counseling and coaching services on specific financial issues, and also provide financial education to develop specific skills and competence, for example, such as retirement planning or pension reforms or long-term savings. And finally, the policy handbook sets out proposed approaches to developing and implementing financial education in the workplace. It's a number of policy considerations for policymakers and other stakeholders, and also employers who would like to design and implement financial education in the workplace. And it is based on the analysis of the findings of the experience of this INFE survey and extensive research as well. It is structured about 4 recommendations, and I will go through them very quickly in my next slide. First one is promoting a strategic and coordinated approach by considering including employees among the target group of coordinated and strategic frameworks such as national strategies for financial education. This is important to ensure higher visibility, foster commitment of parties, and also to have high-level support. And it's also important to create a formal coordination mechanism where all relevant stakeholders are included, as well as employees and employer association, trade union, and sometimes also welfare and healthcare association can be also included in this formal cooperation mechanism, such as advisory group and working group. And important to ensure that the views of all the stakeholders are taken into account and their voices are heard in the policy on the drafting, during the process of drafting the programs. Second one concerned how to support the engagement of employers and how to motivate them to provide the workplace financial education, such as highlighting the business case to employers for providing financial education. This can include, for example, evidence-based communication with concrete examples and data on the needs and benefits on providing financial education in the workplace. It can also take form of organizing public talks, participating in national events, and linked to other events such as International Women's Day, for example. It's important also to leverage on social recognition, because many employers put major effort on constructing their social image, and proposing them to implement financial education programs as part of their social corporate responsibility can be a way to motivate them to do so, and also to showcase, to give them some reward, and to promote, to do a promotion events for this in this respect. It can also induce a pressure among companies. Also assist employers by providing guidance and tools, which is like many OECD INFE members have already done so, and it can help employers to use these resources in implementing and developing programs. Sometimes policymakers can do also joint programs with employers for more tailored programs, and also can help us small companies by providing already free resources. And why not to lead by example and start implement programs in your own institution, which can be a way to getting a good example and demonstrate the feasibility and usefulness of the workplace financial education programs. Third set of recommendations concern how to encourage the participation of employees. For example, to design a good communication plan to increase awareness and motivation. Both policymakers and other stakeholders and employers can do so. The communication plan can be divided into two levels. First one at macro level, during wide public awareness campaigns to inform employees about the risk and also to promote existing platforms and learning materials. And also micro level, which is the workplace advertising. And also here, employers can play an important role, for example, by collaborating with human resources, social well-being associations, and policymakers can assist, can provide assistance for employees on how to best communicate with employees. Also, propose intensives such as reward and certificates, which are a great way to get people to make positive changes, such as having programs for free of charge, integrate them in part of social development programs, provide certification, etc. And also creating a safe environment to discuss about financial issue. It is critical because in this environment, there should be a trust and confidence among employees and employers, so that they are open to discuss their financial problems and not being judged. And also, it's important to acknowledge the diversity and individuality of each employees. And finally, to emphasize on peer-to-peer interaction and story sharing, which can be particularly effective, for example, for young employees. And finally, and this is my final slide, concerns the program design and implementation. And as for all financial education programs, it's important to create a full circle evidence-based approach. This is also important for workplace financial education programs, such as understanding the needs and preferences of employees and employers, make pilots and test before full-scale implementation of workplace financial education program, and also assess monitor and assess company and employee achievements relative to the goals set at the beginning. And finally, propose a combination of program prioritizing behavioral change. This variety of program can be adapted depending on the context and the objective of the program. For example, digital platforms can be also a good tool to reach gig workers or remote workers, and counseling and coaching programs like services can be integrated, adopted by employers, for example, by collaborating with specialized services and offering services with discounts or for free. And finally, applying behavioral insights to financial education to support the behavioral change, such as focusing on teachable moments or using digital tools and using behavioral insight in digital tools to nudge to a specific behavioral for employees. This is it. Thank you. And we'll be happy to hear your question, if any.
Thank you very much, Sona, for sharing this brief overview of the Policy Handbook. As Sona mentioned, this is really just a highlight, but I have put in the chat the link to the report itself, and I encourage you to have a look because there are lots of case studies and different examples from around the world that will for sure inspire you in your work. So for the sake of time, we will go directly into the next session, which is session 1. But of course, if you have any specific questions for Sona on the policy handbook, you're more than welcome to put them in the Q&A function, and we can either take them at the end of session 1 or Sona can reply in writing. So let me now give the floor to Maria Lucia Leitão, who is the head of the Banking Conduct Supervision Department at the Central Bank of Portugal. She is also vice chair of the OECD INFE Advisory Board, and she kindly agreed to moderate this session. So Maria Lucia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chiara. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. Actually, this policy handbook on financial education in the workplace is really a very important and timely report. It is of paramount importance nowadays to promote financial literacy in the workplace. At least this is my perspective. The promotion of financial literacy of the adult population became a priority within the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, as very well reminded us Florent Messi some minutes ago. In the European Union, at the beginning of this year, the European Commission and OECD INFE jointly published the Financial Competencies Framework for the adults in EU. Today's report will help us define an adequate strategy to promote financial literacy of adults. As we know, most of them are employees. In Portugal, the promotion of financial literacy in the workplace became one of the most important lines of action of our national strategy for 21-25. And it is the most complex, I can assure you, and demanding project due to the size and diversity of this target group. Allow me to mention that in Portugal, we started financial literacy in workplace in July 2020 with a pilot project based on our e-learning platform, Todos Contam, in partnership with Portuguese Institute for Employment and Vocational Training. Around 94 employees took part in this pilot project. The aim of this project was to offer on-job training to employees, some of which work closely with vulnerable populations, some of them obviously unemployed. Knowledge retention was assessed via online quizzes filled in by participants at the end of each training module. Key financial topics included consumer budget planning, savings and its applications, basic bank accounts, taking out credit responsibly and preventing over-indebtedness, taking out insurance, as well as safe use of digital channels to access financial products. Later, given the successful implementation of this pilot, we decided to develop a new and more comprehensive project by signing a protocol with the Ministry of Labour in December 2020. Given the large number of participants, Ministry of Labour has more than 20 institutions, around 22 institutions, if I'm not mistaken, and around 20,000 employees. As I said, given this large number of participants, several courses are being held since May 2021, again supported by the learning platform Todos Contam with Moodle environment. The total duration of each course is approximately of 8 hours, and all training hours are counted as working hours according to Portuguese labor law. Each course starts with an opening session conducted through a webinar, which is obviously led by the 3 financial supervisors, the leaders of our national strategy on financial literacy. And in each webinar, the participants receive information on how to assess the learning platform, the structure, the content of each course. Until now, 6 course editions have been held, involving a total of 550 participants, of which around 380 got a formal certification. But this approach may not, at least we think, doesn't work when we need to scale our initiative, our project. It's why we are now reassessing the approach to financial literacy in the workplace. We want, as I said, to scale this project, and we acknowledge that it will be very difficult to follow this approach. And obviously, we know that there is no one size fits all when we need to reach all the different entities. And then we need to be very flexible and have a more comprehensive and at the same time diverse approach. That's why I'm so pleased to have been invited to act as moderator of so distinguished panel today. We need to learn from other international approaches, already very well established strategies. Some of them started in 2017, 2018, to learn how to implement financial literacy in the workplace. I'm very, very honored to have as speakers in this panel our colleagues from the Netherlands, from Canada, from Hong Kong, China, very, very important case studies. They will explain to us their different approaches, successes, and I'm sure also, unfortunately, drawbacks. Without further ado, let me give the floor to Christian Major, head of MoneyWise platform in the Netherlands. But please be reminded that you are invited to ask questions by writing them using the chat or the Q&A function. Christian Major, please, the floor is yours again. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Maria Lucia, and the colleagues of OECD for the opportunity to present the Dutch approach when it comes to financial well-being at the workplace. Good morning and good day to all participants. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about one of the projects of MoneyWise platform in the Netherlands. For those who do not know MoneyWise, the MoneyWise platform was launched by the Ministry of Finance to improve the financial fitness of Dutch citizens. And in order to achieve this, partners from the government, financial services industry, and NGOs collaborate in the platform. It now exists for more than 10 years. And since 5 years, one of our projects covers financial well-being at the workplace. I'll talk you through why we think this is an important project and what our goals are. I'll also cover the results and challenges. In this webinar is also Claret, our project lead. I might need her help in case of difficult questions, Maria. So next slide, please. Just to cover what the problem is. And I'm sure many of these elements are familiar to all of you, but it's good to remind ourselves where financial difficulties stem from. It's life events, which could be a marriage, a breakup, any sort of thing that could change your life and also your financial well-being. Economic circumstances is relevant, especially in this period, I guess, for many people, but also low digital skills, writing skills, reading skills, all contribute. And what's also a global problem, I guess, is shame. I'm sure that shame on money problems is something we see all around the globe. And this is also an important item when we think about the relationship between an employer and his employee. On the next slide is something more about why we should involve employers. They are aware of what someone goes through when it comes to life events. They are aware of marriages. They're aware of divorces and other situations. They also could be alarmed by an attachment of earnings. I'm not sure if this is something that is possible in every country, but this is an order that instructs your employer to divert your money directly from your wage to pay back a debt. So in that case, your salary, part of your salary, is not paid out by your employer, but goes directly to a creditor, which is, of course, an important signal that something's going on. Other signals, such as a request for an advance payment, is also an important moment where an employer could think something is going on. But also important is that employers have an interest, as Sona also pointed out in her presentation. Our figures show that financial health saves 7 days of sick leave and about 20% of productivity. It saves administration. And as Sona also pointed out, financial health contributes to mental health, which contributes to safety at work. So in case of working with dangerous items, heavy machinery, people should be fit for work, and financial health contributes to that. Some figures on our next slide that stem from research in the Netherlands. Productivity loss is estimated to be around 13,000 euros. About 40% of the applications for debt counseling comes from people who have an employment. And some more figures. At the right bottom, nearly 50% of the companies has to deal with attachment of earnings. This is the instrument that I talked about a little bit earlier. So this is a very clear signal that many employers should actually care about financial health of their employees. So in 2017, on the next slide is what we pointed out as goals of our project. So what do we do? We create awareness among employers about financial well-being, and we try to facilitate action. And one of the important things with facilitating action is that it should be accessible. We acknowledge the fact that when an employer finally decides he wants to do something about this topic, it should be as easy as possible to motivate them to persevere and get results. So we created a website. I'll show you a little bit further on how it looks like. We created tools, but we can't avoid to also get in personal touch with employers, with entrepreneurs themselves, but also through human resource officers who are usually appointed to mental health and health in general of the employees. We also acknowledge that we can't provide all services ourselves, and therefore we refer to private organizations with paid services in the Netherlands who also can help in the situation. On the next slide, something more about what we have on our website. We realize that it may be difficult for employers to start talking about money problems. This is the shame part that I spoke of. We give suggestions on how and when to do that, how to start a conversation, when to start a conversation, to have the highest chance of a fruitful conversation, to have the highest chance of success. Of course, we have a checklist per live event, information about how to deal with a situation of wage restraint, good examples by others that may provide inspiration. We try to aim at large employers like the Dutch Railways, for example, e-learning, news, research, and webinars. So something about how it looks is on the next slide. It says snel van start, which is Dutch for quickly start, through recognizing, talking about this problem, and we also divert you to other parties that can help. We try to connect to the questions that employers might have. On the next slide are the tools that we have. For example, 5 suggestions to quickly start, or a handout how to deal with a wage restraint, or e-learning on how to deal with debts that people may deal with. On the next slide is a tool that gives a global indication. So what it says is fill in the number of employees, fill in the number of percentage of full-timers, and fill in the number the average salary, and it will calculate how much productivity loss there is in your organization. This is to give employers an incentive to start working on this problem, and to not work around it. The next slide is a signaling tool. Once an employer gets signals from their employee, for example, someone is going through a divorce, or someone is asking to work more hours, or someone is asking for a loan from his employer. If you click on any of these events, we give checklists and we give accessible tools just to get started on this problem. And I guess that an employer could also consult these texts and tools together with the employee to get a step further. I already mentioned that there are many private services as well. We're happy that we do not stand alone in tackling this problem. There are quite some private services that employers can use. On the next slide, these are paid training courses, coaching, and apps. Of course, we have a limited resources in our own organization. We refer to these apps or other organizations, and I guess that it may have helped that we raised the awareness for this problem, and then the market kind of stepped in and took an opportunity to provide service as well, which is a pretty good thing, I guess. So some of the results, I'll also uncover one of the biggest challenges on the next slide is that it's difficult to measure our results. What we see is that more employers offer help for employees with financial difficulties, but it's difficult to get a statistic. What we see is that more employers are willing to share their examples. So we have nearly 80 examples online. These are examples of employers and the way that they address this issue. Yearly, we run campaigns. So these are online campaigns in which we also use budget. And then we see that there's 10,000 of views on our website. There's a ton of research done in our country on how this problem, what the problem is and what could be done. And a result is that we've given many presentations for employers on how to tackle this. So challenges on the next slide. I must say that from all the projects that we run, this is one of the most challenging one. And I guess one of the main challenges is that employers have many other priorities just by running a business. In combination with the second bullet, an attitude that money problems are the fault of the employees, which is a difficult position to work from. On the other side, 75% of employers are willing to offer help. Still, they don't know how. So we try to step in to that with accessible tools. And talking about money is difficult. This is the case in many situations. Employees are afraid of gossip and job loss. Employers could believe it's too personal, and it's a difficult position when you're the one who decides on a salary and to get involved in money issues, I guess. Other challenges on the next slide. There's enough challenges to work on for us. It's difficult to get attention. It's the next slide, sorry. There's too much to choose for providers and services. So sometimes it's a matter of where should I go with my problem. It's a bit of a taboo to acknowledge the fact that there's employees in your company that have money problems because other employers might think that you do not pay them enough. Employees don't know the possibilities, and it's difficult to measure the impact of our work, which is what I already mentioned before. So that's a real brief oversight on the Dutch approach. Maria Lucia, I'll I'll leave it to that. On the next slide are our contacts. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Christian. Let me now invite Yanni Vlachos, Senior Financial Literacy Program Officer at Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. Yanni,
yes.
You have now the floor, please.
There's just a little problem with the PowerPoint. Okay, there we go. So can anyone see the screen? The PowerPoint's there?
Yes, please, go ahead. Yeah,
Perfect.
good.
Okay, so good morning. Thank you, Maria Lucia, and thank you for your insights, Christian. So happy to be here with you all. My name is Yanni Vlachos, and I am a Senior Officer in Financial Literacy Programs and Partnerships. My main portfolio at the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada has been financial education in the workplace since the beginning of the initiative in 2017. So it's a real pleasure for me to be here today to talk to you about the work that FCAC has been doing in the field of financial education in the workplace and some of the innovative collaborations and initiatives that we've undertaken. So to give you a little bit of background, we're going to go way back in 2014. Doesn't seem that long ago. FCAC held public consultations in the support of the development of the National Strategy for Financial Literacy, Count Me In Canada, which revealed that the most effective way to reach Canadians with financial literacy tools and training is where they're at and where they spend time. So based on this, FCAC determined that leveraging the workplace was an effective channel to reach the widest audience of Canadian adults of all ages and backgrounds with the broadest range of economic circumstances at a time where they navigate a period where they're going to make the most important financial decisions, such as paying back student loans, buying a house, having a baby, saving for retirement, and dealing with unexpected financial hardships. The objectives of our workplace initiative is to create awareness about workplace financial wellness and also to strengthen the knowledge, skills, and behaviors of working Canadians that will lead to greater financial resilience and improve their financial well-being. So what other reasons are there to focus on the workplace as a channel? I know our distinguished keynote speaker will most certainly speak to this in more detail. However, I'd just like to share a little bit of what we found in Canada. So multiple studies and research that we looked at show that finances are the greatest source of stress for Canadians. And as Florent mentioned, the same is true from an international perspective. In 2021, a survey found that even though we were going through the worst, through COVID-19, which was the worst public health pandemic in living memory, Canadians still said that money, not personal health or work or relationships, was their #1 source of stress. Now, as the current slide shows, many Canadians are struggling when it comes to money matters. And the reasons for that financial stress are many, such as managing household expenses, dealing with high levels of debt. Added to that, the complexity of having to navigate personal finances with the rise of digital financial technologies, and with so many products and so many options for products, ranging from credit cards to mortgages. Retirement readiness is also one. Also, in a recent Canadian survey that shows that the COVID-19 pandemic directly impacted Canadians' financial stress levels. It's important to note that the current increases in inflation and the increase in housing, gas and food and interest rates is also a factor. While some Canadians may have a good grasp on their finances, we know that many do not have the knowledge, the skills, and confidence to handle money matters. And this may lead to financial stress. And the impact of that financial stress can have on mental and physical well-being are evidenced by the research as shown in the middle of the screen. And also there was a recent study in the 2021 study reported in the Journal of Social Science and Medicine that also shows the impacts of financial stress on overall health. Financial stress affects working Canadians of all income levels, gender, backgrounds, and age groups. It's no respecter of persons, and it can impact anyone. And that financial stress can prevent us from focusing on the things that matter the most to us. It not only impacts our mental and physical health, but it can also impact our personal relationships. And that stress is not something that we can just leave at home. In fact, research shows that almost half of working Canadians said financial stress impacts their performance at work. And we know there are other consequences, of course. Now, many employers already recognize the advantage of providing financial wellness programs, retirement savings, health, and other benefits to their employees. In recent years, mental health has also has become an important focus in the workplace too. Financial wellness program is a natural extension to these existing benefits and complements other employee wellness programs. Employers also have an important role to play in the financial well-being of their employees. Given the impacts that financial stress can have on the workplace, it's not an issue that can be ignored. It can result or add up to significant costs to organizations and impact the overall well-being of employees if not properly addressed. But the good news is there's something that can be done. The more employers and workplaces realize the importance of employee financial health and the value of offering financial wellness programs, the more Canadians will learn to manage their money and debt wisely, plan and save for the future, basically improving their financial confidence and resilience, and thus reducing their financial stress. So at the start of our journey in 2017, we started by developing an action plan to serve as the overall, as a roadmap for the overall workplace initiative. It focused on 5 key components: research, communications, outreach, tools, and resources. This slide is a high-level summary of what was accomplished since we started the workplace initiative under these 5 strategic categories. An important part of FCAC's workplace initiative and strategic activity plan was the formation of the Financial Literacy Working Group for the workplace. Its objective was to help us develop and expand on workplace financial wellness in order to support Canadian workers in their financial well-being. So the working group was composed of 11 participants from strategically selected national and provincial associations. It included members of the public sector, industry associations, consumer and professional associations. And we also had an advisory board for the framework. Now, the working group's main deliverable was to develop a best practices framework, which became the Financial Wellness in the Workplace web pages that I'm going to speak to later. The working group members contributed their knowledge, experience, expertise, and assisted in the development of the Financial Wellness in the Workplace web platform. So the best practices framework was developed using a holistic approach built on these 3 components. So the first component is research-based. So this was very important. And for this, we conducted a review of research findings and white papers from Canada and abroad to identify best practices for workplace financial wellness. Of note, we also included a series of questions in a national employee survey, which was conducted by one of our working group members, which has over 5,000 respondents annually from across the country. So it's a good survey sample to ask Canadians about workplace financial stress and their preferences relating to financial education in the workplace. The second component was evidence-based. And for this component, what we did is we looked at the experience of the working group participants in delivering workplace financial education, best practices and lessons that they learned. And thirdly, pilots. So we conducted pilots at FCAC that I'm going to speak about in this next slide. So the objectives of the pilot workshops were to test the research found by FCAC and the best practices provided by the working group participants for workplace financial education. This included the communications and marketing of the pilots. Secondly, we used the key findings from the pilots to inform the development of the best practices framework. For the first pilot, the workshops were facilitated by one of our partners that regularly conducts in-person financial education sessions. 15 workshops were delivered, hosted by 9 unique employers from the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, reaching almost 300 employees. We also promoted financial wellness in the workplace and offered financial education to federal public servants. There were 2 initiatives, one for the broader public and one for FCAC employees. For the broader public service, we offered a total of 8 workshops and had over 2,000 participants from every province and territory. And these were offered in person, virtually, and we also had on-demand viewing with over 74 departments and agencies represented. The presentations were offered in both official language, English and Français, and French. We also use different and innovative ways to reach Canadians. As part of the Workplace Initiative, we partnered with Best Life Rewarded Innovations and the Economic Club of Canada to develop the Money Fit Challenge. Now, the Money Fit Challenge pilot was a free rewards-based web portal that delivered financial education using several formats, including video, comprehension questions, and an engaging variety of tools and calculators to help Canadians learn more about money matters and take important small steps to improve their own personal financial well-being. So participants would earn points or rewards by completing the learning activities about budgeting, saving, borrowing, debt, and about their rights and responsibilities when it comes to money matters. Participants would then bid those reward points for existing prize draws, such as various gift cards. The challenge was offered free of charge to employers. It was aimed at the workplace so that employers of all sizes and industries could offer financial education to their employees at no cost and with little effort from a resources perspective. The challenge offered turnkey promotional resources, email invite template, and the employers had access to a personalized dashboard so that they could also measure how many of their employees were participating in the challenge. So the pilot ran for approximately 11 months, Over 40 organizations joined the challenge, which ranged from large to small enterprises. The program featured robust financial literacy content from FCAC, and we developed a series of pre-assessment and post-assessment questions for the Money Fit Challenge. So based on all the work that I spoke to above, the research, the evidence-based information, and the pilot results, we developed and published version 1.0 of financial wellness in the workplace. So this content provides a blueprint for employers and organizations who are committed to improving financial health and wellness of their employees. It's supported by our tools and resources and provides turnkey solutions for Canadian employers of all sizes. We also wanted to create a one-stop shop for employees to use as well. So what you're seeing here is our main workplace webpage. We have content that reaches both employers and employees. So first, let me start with our employer section. So as mentioned earlier by someone, I think it was Maria Lucia, we know that a one-size-fits-all approach does not work and that each organization has different needs and challenges. We wanted to offer all employers something, whether they're starting from scratch or already have a financial wellness program in place. We also wanted to show employers that implementing a financial wellness program doesn't have to be complicated, and we wanted to make it easy for employers to set up a program no matter what their budget or resources. We address the different challenges and obstacles that might prevent employers from offering financial education in the workplace. So based on our research and experience, the most common challenge and obstacles seem to be convincing employers they have a role to play in financial well-being of their employees. Lack of time, money, and other resources, lack of interest among participants, logistical challenges such as multiple locations or shift work, and no management or senior management support. The employer section of our web content identifies those challenges and provides strategies to overcome them and helps guide employers in all stages of their planning. So the section that you see highlighted on the slide in orange, that's for employers who are just getting started or maybe experiencing barriers in getting started. So we provide a section with convincing arguments about how financial wellness in the workplace makes sense and how it will benefit the organization and their employees. The section highlighted in blue, the sections highlighted in blue, I would say, is for employers looking at how to build their financial education program. And there we provide sections with information on how to plan, build, communicate, deliver, and evaluate a workplace financial wellness program. And finally, the section in green is for employers that are looking for tools and resources to use in their workplace financial education. So we provide a section with links to free workshops, both facilitated and self-driven, that has interactive videos, infographics, quizzes, tools, calculators, and more. So what you see here on the screen is a survey template that, so based on our research, we also emphasize that a workplace financial wellness program must be based on the needs of employees in order to be successful. This is a really important step because a program is more likely to engage learners and have impact when the subject matter is tailored to their interests and what they view as important. So to make it easy for employers, we included this survey template so that they could better identify and understand the financial challenges, needs, and interests of their staff. It includes a pre-written survey preamble to assist employers when sending this out to employees. The website is filled with tips and tools like this that employers can use to develop and implement a financial wellness program in their own workplace, such as a checklist to select a financial education vendor. And we also have a checklist for a financial education program checklist, which is the image you see on the right, that an employer can follow when they're planning to do their financial wellness program. Now, for the employees section, there's a section specifically designed for them using language that's easy to understand. Employers can direct their staff to the website, or they can link this to their intranet, or use some of the content provided in this section to build their own workplace programs. We also provide FCAC's educational resources, such as our interactive tools and calculators, videos, and more. And in there, we present information it's all bundled by topic. So there's a section for budgeting and money management, which features our interactive budget planner. We have a section for paying down your debt, smart ways to save, protecting yourself, and planning for retirement. So for the next steps, well, last summer, FCAC launched its new national strategy in the workplace, and it's now part of our 2022-23 business plan. So now that these are in place, we are currently in our strategic planning. We will be optimizing the financial wellness in the workplace resource on canada.ca, and this will include piloting the web resource with various employers to provide additional feedback to improve the tool. Like I said, it's version 1.0, so we're going to improve it further. And we also want to use, we want to generate case studies and testimonials to further demonstrate the benefits of the resource. We want to improve the user and consumer engagement experience. So we'll be looking at technology, behavioral science, etc. for that. We're also going to be looking at ways to target vulnerable groups, and we're going to continue and find ways that we can promote and raise awareness for workplace financial wellness. The pandemic has also changed the way work is carried out in a lot of organizations. So now telework and hybrid work is a growing trend. So we'll have to explore how we can best meet these changes. In addition, I'd like to add that the recent COVID pandemic has had considerable impact on the mental health of Canadians, but also globally. This has helped break down the stigma and created more awareness around mental health, encouraging more people to seek the support they need. At the same time, the pandemic and the current inflation has created and revealed new financial difficulties and uncertainties for Canadian employees and employers. So within this context, it's going to be really important that employers as an ecosystem be made aware of the role they can play directly and indirectly in helping their employees reduce their financial stress to support their overall financial well-being. And perhaps they'll be more sensitive to this topic. Finally, FCAC, yes?
Yeah, you are running out of time, Yanni. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm done. Last
okay.
part. So finally, FCAC was and continues to be well positioned to develop and expand tools and research resources and create greater awareness on financial wellness and well-being. To support Canadian employers in developing the skills and confidence they need to manage their money both in the short term and over the long term, and in ways that will be engaging to them. By increasing awareness and giving Canadian employers the tools and resources they need to support their employees in addressing and overcoming financial stress, the result can be a more engaged, loyal, and healthier workforce, which will in turn create a more robust economy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for going a little bit over time.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry to have interrupted you, but these are rules of the game.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, now I'm very pleased to invite Dora Lee, General Manager at the Investor Financial Education Council from Hong Kong, China. Please, Dora.
Thank you, Maria Lucia. Hello, everyone. It's indeed an honor to be invited by Committee 8 for this presentation. So I'm going to share with you the Employee Financial Wellness Program in Hong Kong. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Sona. Oh, yeah, thank you. So under the backdrop of the very beautiful Hong Kong skyline, I think everybody understands that Hong Kong, the working hour is very long. It can range from 8 hours up to 12 hours per day. So we can see the value of engaging employees and employers through financial education in the workplace. And also the labor force in Hong Kong is huge. Around 52% of the total population are actually working adults. So this is a very good opportunity for IFEC to promote financial education. Next slide, please. So that's why we actually started the financial wellness program since 2018 in a very small pilot scale. But then in 2020, we actually conducted a retirement money matters studies, whereby we also tacked on questions about working adults' financial challenges. The findings is quite alarming. So almost 9 in 10 of working adults suffer from financial stress. And among them, around 42% of them reported that the work performance had been negatively affected by financial stress. So how is that being affected? They find it difficult to focus on work. They deal with personal financial matters during the work time. And most of the time, if they are in financial stress, they would need to take leave or be late for work. And not to mention that they make mistakes during their work time in the work processes. So we can see that this is actually a very big challenge, both for employees and employers. And that's why we think it's important that we need to actually promote financial education in the workplace. Next slide, please. So how can we get by? It is very difficult from the employer's perspective because employers are concerned about costs. Employers are also concerned about time, in particular, if we are conducting these wellness programs during working hours. So what we are trying to get into is, first of all, the human resources department. We try to actually encourage employers to embed financial wellness into their HR strategy. As you're probably aware, wellness of a person consists of different factors. Physical wellness, of course, you need to be healthy in order to work well. Mental well-being actually has a very close correlation with financial wellness as well, as per what has been shared by Christian, Lucia Maria, and also Yanni. And also, of course, social wellness. That's why we highlighted to HR people of different scales of employers that they really need to embed financial wellness into their HR strategy. And we cannot do it alone. The employer themselves, to be spearheaded by the top management, by the HR, needs to do the work. So first step, we organize employer trade union sessions to introduce the idea of financial wellness as a very important part of HR strategy to some of the big trade unions, HR organizations, NGOs, and big employers as well, so that they can be aware of the resources that we have been actually producing, so that they know that we can be a one-stop shop for them to promote financial wellness. And there is no extra cost, and it is flexible as well. The second step is online resources is very important. In the past, before COVID-19, a lot of these activities are being done face-to-face, followed by some blended learning program or some information, PowerPoint sharing, that sort of thing. But as 2019 approached and the COVID-19 came about, we understand that we need to beef up our online resources so that we can actually guide employers to offer financial education in the workplace. However, having said that, all these resources needs to be simple to understand, simple to be dispatched, and actually bite-sized, because Hong Kong is a very busy place. The pace of work and also life is very fast. So we need to actually fit into the lifestyle, the working style of people. And then finally, once we actually get all these HR people, top management engaged and buy in the ideas, we can actually organize seminar in the workplace, webinars in collaboration with the HR for the employees. This has proven to be quite a good journey and also quite welcome by a lot of the employers in Hong Kong. Next slide, please. So we offer a blended learning approach since 2018. All in all, we actually conducted 64 sessions, benefited around 3,000 participants. I think if it is not because of the COVID-19, I think this will be a lot better. We further digitalized our tools and resources last year and also starting from 2020, so as to enhance the reach and avoid a disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. So there are different series of thematic talks. We discuss with the HR personnel to see the different demographics of their employees, what is their interest, and then we organize these thematic talks and also provided practical toolkits for them. We also provide flexible choices for employers so that they can actually help their employees, for example, with simply online simple learning, and also different types of webinars as well. We find that maximum time for employers to be able to do it is 1 hour session. It cannot be too long. But at the same time, the toolkits and also the after blended learning will be very useful for both the employers and the employees. A lot of the times, HR suggested to do a lunch and learn session. And also when employees newly join the company, there is onboarding and orientation session. They welcome these webinars and talks as well. Pre-retirement training is also one good source of workshops and webinars. But we also discuss with HR people that they cannot actually start the pre-retirement training when the employee is doing the retirement or about to retire. They need to actually start early. So we offer different topics ranging from money management. Sometimes some of the HR people would say they would prefer introducing insurance or even children education, that sort of thing. But it has to cater to the needs of the demographics of the employees and also that particular company. With the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of these employers actually had to shift into work from home. They found that this is actually a very good team building exercise, whereby we can create some case studies, which is fictitious for employers to actually talk to their employees about different scenarios so that they can actually find resources to help mitigate if they are in a difficult situation. It's a very good employee engagement exercise. From the employer's perspective, it's also a very good corporate social responsibility area that they want to actually help their employees in different ways to enhance their wellness in various dynamics. Next slide, please. So we look into the digital toolkits. As I mentioned earlier, it has to be very simple. The headline has to be quite appealing to them. Luckily for IFEC, we have the Chin family characters, which is quite well known by different sectors. So we can actually use these characters to portray the message. And also we actually try to include some of the newly created digital quizzes, checklists, and also calculators so that they can actually refer to themselves. One of the success stories is that we actually managed to ask the Hong Kong Association of Banks, whereby all the banks, around 155 of them, are their member. They issue a circular to all member banks to promote the toolkits to both their employees and customers. So it's a very effective way to penetrate financial education into the workplace. Next slide, please. As for impact measurement, there are actually very simple questions at the end of some of the training session to gauge the employees' response and whether they will be able to go further to actually get to know more information. But from the findings from our financial literacy score on financial knowledge, of course, it's not just because of the workplace program, but it seems that in particular, the younger working adults find these quite useful and try to enhance their financial knowledge scores. Next slide, please. The workplace seminars and webinars cannot do things by themselves. I think it has to be coupled with awareness building campaign and promotion so as to raise awareness. I think the Global Money Week also is very important and a good source of actually enhancing the workplace financial education alert to everyone as well. Next slide, please. So last but not least, I think with the proposition that financial wellness should be for all, we try to encourage more employers, in particular the HR, the top management, to include this agenda in their town halls, in their staff survey even. And we are all getting ready for post-COVID-19 promotion to create more value for employers and employees through financial education in the workplace. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Dora. Now we have time for questions. And I'd like to remind you that you can ask questions by writing in chat or Q&A. I myself have lots of questions because these strategies are so well established already and at the same time diversified that I need to learn from you all. But I promise in advance that I will try to behave accordingly to the circumstances. Then let me only ask 2 or 3 questions. My first question would be related to the need to scale. I'm always mentioning this. And obviously, we need to motivate employers. And all 3 speakers mentioned that. And just some seconds ago, Dora mentioned that there was a need to rely on communication campaigns to raise awareness to the importance of financial literacy in the workplace. I wonder, and this is my question, if you had also decided to have as supporters specific stakeholders to promote and to give capillarity to this initiative when trying to reach a large number of employers. For instance, did you rely, any one of you, from Canada, from Netherlands, from Hong Kong, China, did you rely, for instance, on business associations, industry associations, specific associations to try to get their support? And if so, how did it work? And how do you assess the role of those stakeholders? Who wants to take the question? Okay, Dora, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie-Lucia. I think you bring up a very, very important point. Because of limited resources, we can actually reach employers one by one. So it would be good if we can do it on a wholesale basis. The example of the Hong Kong Association of Banks is one of the good examples because they actually coordinated all the members in Hong Kong, and it covers, I think, majority of the working force in certain way. Besides that, the Employers Federation of Hong Kong And for example, the Hong Kong General Chamber of Commerce, these has a lot of big and small employers, whereby if we can actually get the message across through them, there will be an economy of scale, and there will be a lot more interest with also a good word of mouth.
Thank you, Dora. And who wants to bring the approach? Canada, the Netherlands? Did you work with specific stakeholders, for instance, business associations and labor unions also? Who wants to?
We didn't work with labor unions in particular, but I'll just give the example. If you're looking at reaching a large number of people, like we did with the public service, 2,000 people attended. So I think it's important to be able to offer a variety of ways that they can get the financial education. So for this example, well, basically we promoted financial wellness in the workplace to at the HR Council of Canada, which was all the public service HR heads. And I'd say once people are aware, and they'll get it, and they got it right away, and they wanted financial education. So we don't facilitate financial education sessions. However, we got one of our partners to come and do a live presentation. We have a Center of Mental Health in the Workplace, which is a brick and mortar it's a building where public servants can go to get mental health resources and whatnot. And they also have a virtual section. So we had a live presentation with the presenter. It was recorded. People joined online. It was heavily promoted. And we also had on viewer demand. So we know that we can't reach, like Canada is a big country. There's various time slots and all that. So we knew we couldn't reach everyone at the same time and all that. So we had on-demand viewing as well. So, and that's how we were able to reach that large number of people.
Thank you, Yanni.
Marianne?
Yes, please.
In the
Christian?
Netherlands, we've
Yes.
had mixed results. We have some branches who are active and willing to work with us. In branches like cleaning and security. We would like to do a little bit more through organizations, and we had success with labor organizations, indeed.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for your insights. I have now here in the Q&A a specific question to Yanni. A question that it's very much related with my second question. And the question is, after all the research done about financial well-being at employees, have you also done a follow-up to see if everything that FCAC did strengthen their mental and behavioral state overall, meaning the results of all these initiatives conducted? How do we assess the impact of the different initiatives? And I would add, how do you assess when such a project has to be so much decentralized? Because lots of different companies, a large number of employers and employees. How can you manage the assessment of the work you are conducting? And please let us know. Thank you very much. Yanni.
So very good questions. I think there's a lot of elements to that. One thing that's important to keep in mind, and from what we saw in the research, is it takes time for financial educators to see the benefits of financial wellness sessions, right? So, we can have one-off workshops, and basically from there you can assess intended behavior change. You can assess to see if people have gained more knowledge on a subject matter and all that. But when we haven't done any longitudinal studies, that's for sure. And again, according to the research, and also in our workplace web resource, we are very clear that to set expectations that to change behaviors, it takes time. and it's something that it could be anywhere from 5 to 10 years. But the important thing is to measure or also celebrate successes along the way, and also do a regular follow-up. So what we found effective, of course, like the pilots that we did were limited within the time frame that we had. So so again, we didn't do any longitudinal studies. I'd love to do that. So what we did was measure intended behavior change, so increase in knowledge. We had, for the Money Fit Challenge, we had a pre-assessment questionnaire just to see what their knowledge was at the beginning and financial stress and all that. And in order to, like I said, it was rewards based. So in order to get people to do it, we allotted more points, more rewards when you did the pre-assessment. And then we also had a post-assessment. So it was sent a couple of months later after completing the activities. So we did get some good results, but again, it wasn't over a long period of time. So from a long, to say there was all this behavior change would be hard to say, but we did have extremely good results with intended behavior change and also increase in knowledge and participants basically wanting to know more. So that's one of the key things, is that in the questionnaires, in the assessments, we also look to see about their financial stress levels, and we also look to see what their preferences would be. And I guess the high majority of people that participated in all these initiatives, they all said that they're interested in having workplace financial education, and they're looking for their employers for support. So that's a very encouraging sign, and really motivating to move forward.
Thank you, Yanni. Chiara is calling. I'm sure he's going to say that we should close, but let me invite Dora and Christian also to share with us, how do you assess the effectiveness of the implementation of financial literacy initiatives in workplace? And please
yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I'll be very fast because basically, as mentioned before, the pace in Hong Kong is very fast, and they don't have a lot of time doing survey, pre and post survey. So we make a very simple survey. It's the post training to see whether they have gained some knowledge, simple things. And then if we go back to that particular same organization, we can actually compare the overall percentages and results. Thank you.
Thank you, Dora. Christian, and you?
In the Netherlands, this is one of the biggest challenges to measure our effectiveness. I'm afraid we're not too sophisticated in that at this point. We've had many studies about the problem and what we could do about it, and we could do more about on effectiveness studies. I must admit.
I think it's quite complex. I mean, to gather all the information, to have a comprehensive assessment of all different initiatives being conducted in a so disseminated and decentralized way. But anyway, we are not here to give all the answers. We are here to benchmark our own initiatives and try to promote financial literacy in the workplace. And obviously, this is time to close this panel. But before that, please allow me to recall that financial literacy in workplace is now more important than ever. At least is my slogan. Financial stress impact very negatively on work performance, reducing obviously the working days, increasing sick leaves, and obviously reducing productivity, as obviously also Christian very well mentioned in his presentation. Employers need to be aware of the role they can play in helping their employees to reduce their financial stress in order to support their overall well-being. We need to rely on human resources departments when obviously companies are very large. And this is a very important message. And another important message, I think, is that promoting financial literacy of the adult population and of the employees, we are also contributing to have a more robust economy, a more stable and a more balanced society. A faster digitalization obviously also bring a new urgency to promote financial literacy in workplace in order to balance the different levels of digital literacy and digital financial literacy. But we can now rely on digital delivery, which helps us to scale our initiatives. Again, this is a very difficult task, difficult job, project, because the group is very diverse, not only in terms of size of companies, but also by sector, and also in terms of the business background, the professional background of the employees. It's why we acknowledge that each organization has its own needs and challenges. Again, another slogan, there is no one size fits all, flexibility is needed. But the very, very important outcome of this session, and if need be, is to remind all of us that we have this large group of colleagues, if I may use this expression, which allows us to benchmark our national initiatives with those already well established, which can help us, their initiatives, they can help us leapfrog the implementation of our own projects. And I can assure you, I'm very opportunistic. I will try to do my best to try to join your performance. We know that we can benefit from already well-established approaches. And please allow me to invite you to reread this important policy handbook on financial literacy in the workplace. Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure. And sorry for the 7 minutes delay. I think we need, it's urgent to hear from Anne-Marie Loussardi. Thank you very much to you all and to my panelists.
Thank you very much, Maria Lucia, and also to Dora, Yanni, and Christian for sharing their experiences. This has been extremely enriching. And I have now the pleasure and the honor of giving the floor to Professor Anna Maria Loussardi, who is University Professor of Economics and Accountancy at the George Washington University School of Business in the US. As you know, she's also the founder and academic director of the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center and director of the Committee for Financial Education in Italy. So she has the perfect blend of academic and policymaking experience to guide us through the rationale and the motivation for financial education in the workplace. So Anna Maria, please, the floor is yours.
Chiara, thank you very much, and thank you all for being here today. Thanks for the previous speaker for having offered already such important experience in doing financial education. Let me share my screen. I have prepared this short presentation where I want to mention that GFLEC is as celebrated is the centennial this year. And I want to bring together and bring you some of the lessons from our 10 years of experience, because from the very beginning, we have actually worked on workplace financial education. And in my own work, as I started working on financial literacy, the first project was a project at my own institution that was Dartmouth College then, in doing workplace financial education for the Dartmouth employees. What I would like to do today is just talk about 3 topics. First, the need for the workplace financial education. Also talk about some of the initiatives that we have done, in particular at GFLEC, but also in Italy, in the area of workplace financial education, and some suggestions for looking ahead what can be done in this area. I want to start by talking about our newest project, which is a joint project with the TIA Institute. This is the research arm of TIA, which is one of the biggest pension plans in the US dedicated to the education industry. With them, we have started to collecting data back in 2016. So we have actually now a rich source of data each year. And we have been looking at the personal finance knowledge. And we have as many as 28 questions to measure that personal finance knowledge. We cover as many as 8 areas of financial decision making. So it's a very, very comprehensive measure. You might know some of the big 3 or the big 5, but here we have 28 questions. We are looking at a representative sample of the US population, and I'm going to start with that just to motivate the need for financial education. And I hope, and perhaps we can share experiences about whether some of these statistics apply in your countries as well. So as I mentioned, the data started to be collected. We started in December 2016. We have been collecting data each year, normally in January. And so we have as many as 6 years of data. In addition to collecting data on a representative sample, we also zoom in each year on a specific groups. Normally the most vulnerable or the more important group. So we have looked at, for example, Hispanics, African Americans, women, the young, different population groups as well. Let me just start with some motivating statistics reflecting some of the facts that other people have reported. And this year, this refers to the 2021 data, where we have been looking a lot at kind of the balance sheet of families. And here I report some of the difficulties that people face. For example, many could not face a shock, and this is even after the government intervention providing support to some of the families. But as you can see here, both lack of precautionary saving or both managing debt is providing a lot of challenges to families. And as we will see, this potentially can affect also their work and their productivity in the workplace. I also want to show you that, as families have to make many financial decisions, and here I'm reporting also the one which are more urgent and more related to the short term, they do so with a very low level of financial literacy. I remind you that we have 28 questions to measure personal finance knowledge. And what you can see that even in the US, which is a country with the most developed financial market, you cannot take the personal finance knowledge for granted. In fact, because we have such a detailed measure of personal financial knowledge, we can look even at the distribution, and we can see that there is a very large group, as many as 23% who cannot even answer 7 of the 28 questions. So, here is a kind of dramatic, insufficient level of financial literacy. But on average as well, people can only answer half of the question. If you only answer half of the question in my test, you don't get a passing grade. So the level of financial literacy is not only low, but as we look at this over time, over this 6 years period, we don't see that financial literacy is improving. And this is to say, if you don't take action, if there aren't specific strategies to really improve the level of financial literacy, the changes are very, very small, if not existent over time. And there is a persistent high group of the population who have very, very, very little level of financial knowledge. Unfortunately, the level of financial literacy is particularly low among vulnerable groups. And I think it's very important, and one of my points today is that we really need to focus on the vulnerable groups, those who have low education, those who have low income, those who are not employed. And interestingly, if we look at how these changes have done over time, for example, we still see a large gender gap in financial literacy. And the people who are acquiring financial knowledge in this 6-year time are already those who have high financial literacy. In other words, we are growing more unequal over time when it comes to financial knowledge. Interestingly, this is not happening for the young, and I think this is probably due to the initiative in the schools. But when we look at the adult population, if any, we are diverging rather than converging. So why is this financial literacy so important? Because when I now try to link this financial literacy to behavior, and this is the importance of looking at financial literacy as well, because it's linked to so many behavior. Compared to those who have high financial literacy, those who have low financial literacy are 6 times more likely to have trouble making ends meet. They are 3 times more likely to be debt constrained. They are 3 times more likely to be financially fragile, 4 times more likely to spend a lot of hours in dealing with personal finance issues. So, it's important that we increase that level of financial knowledge, and this will also affect behavior, in addition to targeting potentially this behavior directly. I want to show you in the next slide one of the reasons why, in my view, we have a simple back on the envelope calculation for why it could be convenient to do financial education in the workplace. Let me show you the question that we have asked in the last few years in our survey with the TIA Institute. We have asked individuals how many hours per week they spend thinking about and dealing with issues and problems related to personal finance, and how many of these hours are at work. This is, in a sense, a measure, first, of financial stress, if you like, financial troubles, and also is the time we spend, right? So it has a cost implication. And I think the results are stunning. People spend an average of 7 hours per week dealing with personal finance issues, and 3 of those hours are at work on average. So people spend almost a full day in dealing with personal finance issues. And if you look at the people with low financial literacy in this graph, you can see that with those with financial literacy, in a sense, the vulnerable group, spend even more hours dealing with these personal finance issues, as many as 12, a day and a half spent dealing with that, and 7 of those hours are at work. So employer, which in particular are dealing with people with low financial literacy, have a lot of workers who at work have to deal with or are stressed about personal finance issues. I think we can do a back on the envelope calculation here. Take, even the average 7 hours or 3 hours multiplied by the minimum wage. If this is greater than the cost of doing a financial education, there is a clear economic incentive for an employer to do financial education in the workplace. It's a win-win situation, and more so if you have a lot of, for example, vulnerable group, more so if you have workers which have low level of financial literacy. We have actually partnered with Stanford more recently and look at other data set and where we document, for example, how can we build more financial resilience? And we document how this financial resilience is really lacking in the US, even at a time where the economy was booming and the stock market was at an all-time low and the unemployment was at an all-time low as well before the COVID-19 pandemic. Even the economic conditions weren't lifting all boats. And there was, in the new report, we have also documented, for example, the level of financial anxiety, some of which was quoted earlier. So we really need to address some of those concerns, build financial resilience, and the workplace is an ideal place to do so because this is where the adults are. So let me turn now to the second part of my presentation and to mention how we have taken all of this research, more than 10 years, to, for example, design and build financial education program. I'm going to mention only a few, and if we have time, I can discuss more, but we have built a website on our GFLAC website where you can find all of the initiative and many of the ones that we were able to make available. So you can see the research, the result, the assessment that we have done for many of these projects. I have to say we were very happy that several years ago, in fact, almost at the beginning of the work of GFLAG, we have worked with the New York Stock Exchange Foundation to build a financial wellness initiative for the workplace. So the New York Stock Exchange, as you know, as all the big firms, so they were very interested in designing a kind of a general toolkit that could be applicable to all of the big firms. And we are here actually ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange Foundation, where we launched that initiative. In a sense, you know, you could build a general program. And what we did here, we wanted to make sure that it covered the many concerns that the employees had, in particular the low financial literacy one, which were not just retirement saving, but for example, financial fragility, managing debt, dealing with a lot of emergencies. I also want to mention another project that we did, and this is for 3 reasons. First of all, many people think that financial education is expensive, but in fact, you can do many low-cost financial education programs. And in this case, we just did a project for the young, and we designed 5 simple videos. These are 3-minute videos in which we teach this basic financial concept. You know, from risk diversification to the fact of inflation. This can be quite helpful also back to date. So how to take advantage of employer matches and tax advantages in savings. And perhaps because these are so important and fundamental concepts, but there is such a lack of knowledge, we found, and we were surprised ourselves, how this, you know, simple and very short video had an effect on knowledge. We targeted the young, but the effect actually applied to all of the participants, irrespective of age, and they were relatively long-lasting. Even after 8 months, when we went back and measured, for example, the financial knowledge, we did see an increase in the level of financial knowledge. And this is because I think the levels are so low that even simple intervention in a group, which by the way, we think is quite receptive to financial education, can have effect, and you can do it in a relatively inexpensive way. More recently, we literally launched this last April. We have worked with a Fortune 25 company. So one is one of the largest company in the US. Unfortunately, we cannot report their name. We have partnered with Edelman Financial Engine and designed for them a program which is called Fast Track to Financial Wellbeing. So this is deployed to the nearly 30,000 employees at this company. And we structure it in a 6 weeks program. As you can imagine, this was very much led by the current situation, you know, the fact that we live in a pandemic world, we live in a world with a lot of uncertainty, with an increasing risk and so on. And so what we did here, and I'll have to be relatively brief or report what, in a sense, are the essential part of the program, is we have taken the employee through an initial assessment to generate a baseline financial well-being score, where the well-being score has really been used using our research to kind of measure this well-being. And we segment all of the groups. You know, we know a lot of the demographics, so we could have segmented already, but this assessment allows us to understand what are the needs of the employee and segment them so we can provide more proper resources. And actually some of those resources are counseling offered by the Edelman Financial Engine. And the participation is also incentivized, so people are potentially more likely to participate. And we are going to look at the effect on knowledge, confidence, and their attitude in the short term, and also changes in the behavior in the long term. This is also a way for us to understand now and touch the pulse of what is happening in the workplace, given these huge changes, given, by the way, a lot of people are not even physically in the workplace. Given that there is such in the US in particularly, a strong need to retain talents, and given all the difficulties that the people have experienced during this very long pandemic. So we are very excited about this project and the fact that we can work with such a large number of employees. Clearly, it's not just the large firm are doing workplace education, but there is a huge need as well in the small and the medium-sized firms as well. And we have actually done one of the webinar in our initiative, which is called Connecting to Reimagine webinar. We designed one just to cover financial wellness in the workplace, and we have provided both our research, but also like here, we did kind of a mini initiative where we are also reporting the initiatives and what small firms have done with the help, for example, of non-for-profit organization to provide financial education in the workplace. And here are some suggestions as well, if you'd like to see of what can be done in the small workplaces. I know that some of you have mentioned, but does financial education work? How can we do the assessment? The assessment, I think, is very important because nothing is important like success. And for some of you who are skeptical about financial education, let me tell you that we did over a course of several years an assessment of financial education, not just workplace, but it includes workplace financial education in as many as 33 countries. So we provide a very comprehensive meta-analysis. It really means looking at all of this financial education and in particularly focusing on the most rigorous evaluation. And we found that a resounding evidence, strong evidence that financial education does work, not only, but that financial education can be cost effective. So for those who think, how can I do it? Well, there are lots of suggestions, and there is a very, very strong evidence that you can do it in a cheap way, and it is still effective. Let me turn now to Italy. I'm very, very happy and proud to say that in the very first year of the life of the Financial Education Committee in Italy, when we launched Financial Literacy Month, one of the initiatives that one of the ministry that is part of the committee did was a workplace financial education in their own place. So the Ministry of Finance and the Economy opened the door to the employee and their families, and we did during Financial Literacy Month just an initiative of workplace financial education dedicated to the employees and their family, including their children. So on a Saturday morning, we opened the door to the Ministry of the Economy and Finance, which is a beautiful building, and the family of the employee came in, and we actually did financial education from the children to the adults. And I still think is one of the most exciting initiatives. But much more recently, we have written a guideline to do financial education for the workplace. So now everybody who wants to do it can actually have a guidelines to see what are the topics that, for example, a good and robust financial education program can do. And we have also been again involved in doing financial education. We have done it for a big organization. So we could actually take that material and post it on our website. So there is also material and videos and so on that people could eventually use. We are still finalizing those because we did in a sense a pilot, but now we need to make it general enough for everybody. And I'm very grateful, for example, to the initiative and the great work that COVID, one of our members, which is devoted in particular to pension and supplementary pension, has done. They've really seen that in particular to promote pension, it is a supplementary pension, it is critically important to improve financial literacy. So we have partnered with one of the best universities in Italy and tried to do initiative there. And if you look at our working paper posted on our website, our first working paper was exactly assessing a financial education program in the workplace with design to improve pensions. Let me conclude just by saying, financial literacy is like water in an ecosystem. So we need it for people to flourish. We need for people to be financial resilient and to improve their financial well-being. And just to conclude, financial education in the workplace is clearly important if we want to reach the adult population, and we need to pay particular attention to the vulnerable groups. It's important also to have a holistic approach. In other words, not just focus on just one topic, because as you have seen, there are so many concerns that family have, and which can bring those concerns and worries with them in the workplace. And when you work with the firm, I think everybody plays a role. It is clearly important, at least in our experience, to have the okay of the CFO and the CEO for them to be very involved, to be supporting this initiative, not just the HR office. It really takes the whole firm to do a good program, and also research is critically important as well. All of this information is available on our website, but let me conclude just simply by saying, it takes visionary leaders to promote financial education, because as you know, financial education does play off in the long term. And so you need to have these long-term visions. And this is why I'm so grateful for the OECD to have done this work. I think this handbook will probably change the current state. Now we have really something that shares all of the experience. We have tools. We can do so much. In my experience, workplace financial education is difficult, but it's not mission impossible. It can be cheap, and it changes the life of people. So it's incredibly important. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna Maria, for sharing all these insights across the US, Italy, and around the world. So let me check if the audience has one or two pressing questions for Anna Maria. We can still take them. Otherwise, we will move to the next and final session. So let me check. I don't see anything in the Q&A. Of course, you're still welcome to ask your questions in the Q&A, and perhaps Anna Maria can answer in writing if we don't have time now. So, okay, I would suggest to move on to the second main session of this webinar, which is a panel discussion about changing workplaces and the future of financial education, and especially financial education in the workplace. So I have the honor of moderating this session, and let me share just some background and motivation for why we have decided to organize this panel discussion. So since the OECD INFE started working on this policy handbook in 2018, then, as you can imagine, a series of trends and major events have been affecting all of us, individuals, companies, and are also transforming workplaces. So, of course, the most and major trend that has happened in recent years is the COVID-19 pandemic. This has had immediate and very strong effects on the incomes, jobs, and working arrangements of millions of workers around the world, and on the prospects of many businesses. Of course, the income and job losses and profit losses have forced individuals, households, and companies to focus on the short-term emergency that we all went through, and focus on how to prepare for future crises. And of course, policymakers in parallel have put in place many efforts and policies for sustaining financial resilience with the idea of building back better. Of course, now as we are coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are facing new issues. As we know, the war in Ukraine, but also pre-existing trends are bringing about rising energy prices, bottlenecks in global supply chains, rapidly growing inflation, and this is affecting, of course, both families and companies very deeply. At the same time, COVID-19 crisis has also accelerated the shift towards greater digitalization in financial products and services, in the ways in which companies operate and sell their products, in the ways they are arranged internally, also in terms of teleworking and remote working, and this has affected societies overall. For many, this growing digitalization trend, of course, has been a positive development, but but this is provided that people and also firms had all the necessary access, infrastructure, and skills to benefit from this greater use of digital technologies. And of course, as we know, there are risks of widening existing digital divides and creating new forms of exclusion. All of this, of course, had an impact on workplaces. As I mentioned, remote working has been perhaps the most visible effect of these trends. It has been the norm for several months during the time of COVID-related restrictions. And even now, as restrictions are easing, this is remaining more likely and more widespread, certainly, than it was before the pandemic, at least in some industries and in some companies. And last but not least, it's worth mentioning that all of this is happening within the context of changing labor markets. We know that there is a growing emergence of new forms of work, new forms of employment, and especially jobs with limited security. And this, of course, has implications for the workers, their families, and companies. So this is just to put the session into context. As we know, all the trends that I have mentioned, COVID, digitalization, changing workplaces, growing inflation, and so on. This has implications for financial education in general and for financial education in the workplace. So the aim of this session today will be to discuss how the rationale, the content, and also the delivery methods of financial education in the workplace are changing following these issues. So we have the pleasure to discuss these issues today with a great set of speakers that come from a diverse background. We have policymakers, we have representatives of employers, we have also an OECD colleague, policy analyst, and we have wide representation in terms of countries and geographical regions of the world. So let me introduce our great speakers. First of all, we would have Mariela Saldivar, who is the Deputy Superintendent of Market Conduct and Financial Inclusion at the Superintendence of Banking, Insurance and Private Pensions in Peru. And she is also a member of the OECD INFE Advisory Board. We will also have Michael Royce, who is Senior Policy and Propositions Manager at the Money and Pension Service in the United Kingdom, who is also a very active INFE member. We will be joined by Stéphanie Payet. She's a policy analyst in the private pensions unit at OECD and conducting relevant research to the topic we are approaching today. We will have Rodney Bolden, who is Vice President of Financial Wellness at Morgan Stanley at Work in the United States. And last but not least, Mark Williamson, who is Benefits Manager at the New Zealand Defence Force. So before I go into the questions and in the discussion, let me remind once again the audience that you're more than welcome to put your questions in the Q&A function, and I will try to weave your questions in the discussion as we go along. So first of all, I would like to start with a round of first round of questions, which are more introductory questions to allow each of you to explain what you're doing and your work. And just as a general reminder, I would be grateful if you can keep your answers short so that we can keep the discussion going and lively. So let me start with Mariela, perhaps. So could you briefly describe the experience of the SBS in Peru in supporting companies in providing financial education in the workplace, please?
Thank you, Chiara. Good morning, everybody. Superintendence is the financial regulator and supervisor in Peru. We started working on financial education since 2006. And in 2010, we developed this Finanzas para Ti, that is Finance for You, that is mainly focused on financial education programs in workplaces. We work there. We organize the program in 4 modules. There are 2 hours modules that can be taken independently. This is one for personal finance, the other one from duties and rights on financial consumers. The third one is focused on pension funds, and the last one on insurance. This program is currently part of one of the most important measures in our strategic plan on the implementation of our national policy on financial inclusion. The superintendent is part of this multi-sectoral commission. Actually, we are the technical secretariat that have to implement the national policy on financial inclusion. And we, as part of one of the priority objective, we have this specific program, this specific measure, try to improve and expand the outreach of the current program. We train around 30,000 people per year, and we plan to just go broader with the program. I think that's it.
Thank you, Mariela. Thank you very much for this introduction. Let me just ask a similar question to Michael as well. So how is MAPS in the UK supporting companies on financial education or financial well-being in the workplace?
Thank you, and hello everybody on the call. So the Money and Pension Service, which is a statutory body linked to the UK government. We have three approaches to this, how we support companies to provide financial education in the workplace. The first is through direct engagement with employers by offering them access to free tools and resources from our money helper services. So we have our direct consumer side of operations. These resources help employees understand and manage changes to their financial situation brought about by the pandemic, and more recently by increases in the cost of living due to inflationary pressures in the economy. The second way we do this is through research and innovation by testing financial education and guidance alongside people's access to financial products when offered by their employers. And the third way we do this is by advising financial services firms, often through their trade bodies, about how to embed financial education and guidance alongside the financial products they offer and market to employers.
Okay, this is quite impressive. Thank you very much, Michael. Let me turn to Rodney. So you're more on the provider side of financial education in the workplace. Could you briefly explain what your job is about?
Sure, absolutely. So Morgan Stanley at Work is the workplace wealth offering of Morgan Stanley. What we do is work with institutional clients and prospects on delivering financial education content. We meet employees where they are today in their financial journey, and then provide them with the tools, education, resources, advice, and guidance to get them to where they want to be tomorrow. We do that by providing not only education, which is the foundation of the program, but also one-on-one consultations, financial coaching, and financial planning, so that employees will know the steps they need to take after they gain the knowledge that Professor Lusardi talked about. They also have calls to action to take that will help them improve their overall financial well-being by focusing on their current financial behaviors and looking for ways to improve them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And let me turn to Mark. So you are working for the government, but from the point of view of the employer side. So could you explain your role in New Zealand, please?
Okay, look, thank you very much for the opportunity to. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate tonight. It's been a really interesting discussion and some great presentations. So thank you to everyone concerned. So I represent the New Zealand Defence Force. We're one of New Zealand's larger employers. We've got about 15,500 people, and our personnel budget is just over $1 billion US. That's for the people side of things. And our organisation is like a cross-section of New Zealand society and is outlined in many of the presentations today. Many of our people are experiencing financial pressures as a result of COVID, things like increasing inflation, increasing interest rates, and on top of that, major housing affordability issues in a number of the locations where we have our people posted. We've been working with another government agency called the New Zealand Retirement Commission. We've been working very collaboratively with them over the last almost 7 years now and providing comprehensive financial capability training for our people. We've had an element of success about that. To date, we've probably trained between 3,000 to 4,000 of our 15,500 people, but there's still a lot more to be done. And certainly, again, one of the challenges we've found in the COVID environment, where a lot of our staff were heavily involved in doing MIQ hotel enforcement duties, there wasn't sufficient time for them to do classroom type things. So what we were doing is running out the digital side of things, which is doing webinars and podcasts and things like that. That presented particular challenges for us, and we will talk about that further, I know, in the session and things.
Thank you so much, Mark, for this presentation and for anticipating indeed some of the issues that we will discuss. So let me turn to Stephanie, who is an OECD colleague. So Stephanie, so we know that as part of your work at OECD, you're developing research and policy guidance on the role of employers in offering employees access to retirement savings plans, which is also an important component of their financial well-being along with financial education. So can you explain us what role can employers play in offering access to retirement savings plans, please?
Thank you, Kara. Hello, everybody. So indeed, this work on the role of employers in the provision of retirement savings plans, we started last year, and it is being developed with the OECD Working Party on Private Pensions, which groups all the regulators and supervisors of pensions in the OECD. And we actually are meeting with them next week, where we'll discuss the development of the work on providing guidance on how to enhance the role of the employers in that space. And indeed, employers have a role to play to support their employees to save for retirement, and that support can take different forms. The employers can design the plan that they offer to their employees in a way that it fits the preferences of their employees. So for example, you would have a different plan for nurses and a different plan for employees in the banking sector. Employers can also simplify some of the decisions that employees need to make in relation to their retirement savings. So they can select some of the features of the plan. They can also use some of the behavioral solutions that we know, automatic enrollment, having default options, so people don't need to worry about making very complicated decisions. They can also support their employees when they save through payroll deductions, and also by paying, the employer can also pay some of the contributions to help. And it also includes matching contributions from the employer to incentivize contributions from the employees. Although this is less and less the case, employers can also share some of the risks related to saving for retirement, such as longevity risk, investment risk. There are still employers very committed to share those risks with the employees. Because employers have bigger size than just you as an employee going to your bank and opening a retirement savings account, the employer can negotiate better terms for the administration of the plan. And in particular, you can have lower fees if you are in a collective plan rather than in an individual plan. And finally, more related to what we are discussing today, the employers can provide financial education about retirement savings. And there are many studies showing that when you have this type of financial education program, it increases the participation rate in the plan and also the contributions paid by employees. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. This is very useful to put our discussion in context, and it's true that retirement savings are certainly a big topic as part of financial education in the workplace, and possibly one of the most obvious ones. Let me now turn to the rest of our discussion. So I would like to start the discussion by asking our panelists about how the needs or the rationale for financial education in the workplace has changed in recent times following the trends that I mentioned before, such as COVID-19, changing labor patterns, or even the current economic situation. So I would start again from Mariela. So how do the rationale, I mean, if any, has there been any change in the rationale or the needs or the motivation for financial education in the workplace in Peru in recent times?
Okay, thank you very much. As you mentioned before, I mean, the COVID affected the whole country, the whole economy, and everything was changed. Actually, financial ecosystem was changed, and people had to adapt to it. Now employees have to deal with services that they were not used to, digital financial services, I mean. They usually, in the past, prefer to go to branches, stay there, see face-to-face relations with people, but suddenly things change. So I think it's digitalization and the risk related to them was something that was changed on people, also employees, of course, and we have to refocus all our training, just focus on that topic. Now, on the other side, there were also, because of the economic hit we received, in the family, there were people that lost their jobs, and it also affects people's stress. Currently, they were more open to listen about financial education, how to manage their finance, how to manage a budget. Maybe previously, I mean, employers just try to organize these kind of programs, but at the end, people just stay there without listening, without paying attention about what they listen, and trying to understand or concentrate about the programs in the past. But during this period, what we saw is that people were very interactive. They wanted to understand how to deal with this problem. They were very open to learn about that. Other things that affect, I mean, in the country, in Peru, is that because of the COVID, there were many government policies that were implemented. One of them was allow people to access to their pension funds because of the COVID, because of restrictions. And what happened is that suddenly people receive money that they don't, expected, because they were working, they have their salaries, but they also receive this additional money. And they have to understand what to do with it. They have to understand that they are using money that were, that the objective of this money was the future for them. And they just have the money now, and they receive many offers. E-commerce brought grow up very fast in the country. And we also see that people that were with stress, with mobility restrictions, suddenly they receive a lot of offers. They start to buy everything. And we see in our credit bureau problems of over-indebtedness for people that were employees that didn't lose their wage. And this is something we saw about that. So we also focus on that issue. And maybe something that is that was changed is that at the beginning, coordinate with employers were not easy. But with technology, we could go there in a very easy way, and it was not too expensive to them to coordinate a meeting with 50 people, 100 people sitting together receiving this training. It was simple on that issue. And something that was very, very good in my country is that go to micro entrepreneurs was, so complicated in the past, because it was not cost effective. Go to an enterprise and just try to train 5 people, 10 people in just one small enterprise. And micro enterprises was more than 95% of enterprises in terms of number of enterprises in my country. So we go to a second floor bank that they also have incentive to train these people in order to, to receive the money back, you know. So they organize many enterprises so that superintendents could train micro entrepreneurs, the people that work in these micro enterprises in just one meeting. And this second floor bank was a very strategic ally to go more deeper. I mean, in terms of the enterprises we could go to train in Peru. Okay, that's it.
Thank you so much. This is very interesting, and I would like to pick on this general point that, of course, for bad reasons in a sense, but the COVID pandemic provided a big push for financial literacy and financial education in a sense. So I would like to turn the question also to Michael. Have you also observed this, an increase in the demand for financial education in the workplace? And if so, were there different needs during the pandemic than before? You're muted, sir.
My apologies. Definitely an increase in demand from employers to support their staff facing really quite challenging situations. What we found, though, overall, was that the needs we knew about were in effect reinforced and even exacerbated by the pandemic. So for example, yes, a greater capacity to use digital tools and resources to reach and engage people with financial education and guidance. But at the same time, it really put into sharper focus the digital access challenges faced by the likes of shift or agency workers working in more remote locations. When you contrast that with people who could work in more hybrid fashion between home and the office, more predominantly for certain periods at home. Overall, this seemed to have impacted disproportionately workers who benefited from government support schemes to pay some more of their wages to keep them in work and to keep them solvent. Obviously, these access challenges aren't new, but the pandemic certainly reinforced them in the minds of certain groups. Perhaps more importantly, people's concerns about building financial security have increased across the board during the pandemic and more recently with the cost of living challenges. On the face of it, this should be a good thing. More people engaged with building their financial security, but it's also had a negative impact because it's also affected their mental well-being. So overall, this is where financial education guidance can play an important role, but it has to be alongside other well-being support, thinking about the emotional impact of the challenges that people have faced over the last 2.5 years.
Yes, indeed, of course, and thanks for reminding that, of course, financial education is one part of the puzzle, but certainly not the only one. So I would like to ask a similar question also to Rodney and then to Mark. So have you, what was your experience in the US, Rodney? So I assume you have also experienced an increase in demand for financial education in the workplace, and have you observed different needs for this?
Absolutely. Just like Michael said, definitely an increase in demand. And what was interesting is that the demand was being driven by employees, where when we surveyed employees, what we found is that 83% of employees said that their employers should be more involved with helping them navigate specific financial troubles. 91% of employees reported having personal financial issues. And what was interesting is that when we asked on the other side of the coin, the HR executives, what they were doing, what they were hearing from employees, over half of HR executives said that employees were regularly mentioning their personal financial issues at work. And also what they found is that 4 out of 5 employees were requesting types of financial well-being support that the company was not offering. And With what's going on right now in the US and worldwide, the term being the Great Resignation, where according to the Society of Human Resource Management recent survey, over 50% of employees said that they plan to look for new employment in the next 12 months because the pandemic has made them realize the importance of having a better work-life balance. Employers are really focused on retention and understand that the way to do that is through financial well-being benefits. 91% of employees said that they would be more likely to stay at an employer that offered financial education, financial wellness benefits that met their needs. And this is the thing that about the pandemic, it just accelerated trends we had already seen. When I started in financial wellness 20 years ago, financial education was on just the fundamentals. It was on retirement, it was on budgeting, it was on creating savings. And that's pretty much it. And maybe buying a home. Now what we've seen is employees have said, hey, you know, we want things personalized to where we are, what we're going through. So we see employees say, hey, during the pandemic, I lost a loved one. I want to know how to navigate that from a financial perspective, or I'm going through a divorce, or maybe I'm the parent of a special needs child. What we've seen is that there's the need to create modules to meet people where they are today. Financial education is most effective when it's timely, meaning delivered when a person needs a particular item, such as if my main concern is student loan debt, I'm not really concerned about retirement right now because that's far off, but I have debt that I have to take care of because it's impacting my financial well-being. So it has to be timely. It also has to be relevant, has to be delivered in a format that's going to be effective for that particular employee. I love what Professor Lasardi talked about, those short videos, because we've actually seen that where you have to realize education is not just that 1 hour webinar. It can be in the form of delivering, maybe people want to read articles, maybe people want to see short 2-minute videos and engage with that in the education. And lastly, it has to be actionable. What we've seen is that it's more effective and behaviors change, and we've shown that through our assessment, both pre-engagement and after they engage with the education. It's better when you end with some calls to action, things that they should be doing in order to improve their financial well-being. It's not enough just to teach them about budgeting, but give them calculators, tools in order to construct a budget.
Thank you very much for raising this point. The issue will be then whether financial education or wellness in general will be enough as a retention factor or not, but I guess the future will tell us. Mark, please. I guess similar issues might also be going on in New Zealand, as have been mentioned by many other speakers, including growing house prices, inflation. Is this also applying in New Zealand, and is this providing an additional motivation for financial education in the workplace? Sorry, Mark, you're muted.
It's providing additional motivation, but it's also providing additional stress for many of our people. None of our people lost their jobs during COVID. None of them took a pay cut during COVID, apart from our senior command chain, the Chief of Defence Force and the senior leaders. But many of our people had partners and spouses who may have lost their job or taken a pay cut. And so they're dealing with the challenges faced by that. And then on top of that, now, like many countries overseas, we're now facing higher inflation, something we haven't seen for nearly 30, 40 years. We're seeing higher interest rates, admittedly from a very low base, but that impacts affordability both for people to buy and for people to rent. And so there's particular challenges being faced in many parts of our organisation. And as our economy opens up and Australia opens up, our largest and biggest neighbour, there's a risk that we lose many of our skilled engineers and warfare officers and people like that we actually need to run our organisation. There's a risk we lose them to better paid jobs across the Tasman. So it's very much in our interest to hold on to those people. As a government agency, we can never be a high payer, but what we do is we put emphasis on other services and benefits and support that we're able to provide at relatively low cost. But what it does do is it delivers services, particular values to individuals. And and to their families as well, because households and families are very much part of our organisation. A lot of the things that our people do, it has a significant impact on the families, and so we need to make sure that we are actually providing support for the families. At the moment, we've got 100 people in Europe training members of the Ukrainian armed forces. Those people are 12,000 miles away from their families back in New Zealand. And so what we're doing is we provide support for the families to make sure that they don't feel isolated or anything else. In terms of Stephanie, you'll be pleased to know that we actually run a comprehensive staff savings scheme, retirement scheme. We have 93% of our people contributing to our scheme. And when they leave defence, they can continue to contribute to it as well. Rodney, in terms of the issues you're raising, I totally agree with what you're saying. And we actually provide a financial advice service to help people with their particular issues they may be facing, whether it's a relationship breakup, dealing with a heavy debt burden, credit card burden, all those sort of factors, can't get into the housing market. So we have a relationship with a financial advice service that is headed up by ex-military officers. So that particular person and his team fully understand what it's like to be in the military. And the financial advice service works very closely with our members and their families around the particular issues they may be dealing with. And we will fund a number of financial plans each year for what we determine as vulnerable households. In other words, people who may be facing particular challenges. We will actually fund for the family to have a financial plan provided for them. It's never enough because there's always things going on in people's lives and things, but bit by bit, we are trying to build what we're doing. We'd actually been running our financial capability programs for several years before COVID, and we were getting some success. And we started putting in place programs for women, as an example, around the challenges that women face in investing for retirement, investing to get into the home ownership, all those sort of factors. We have our Indigenous Maori community, so we're looking at programs for them. We actually have a very large Pacifica community. Auckland, which is our largest city, actually has the largest Pacifica community in the world. Far more Pacifica people live in Auckland than they actually live in Samoa or Tonga or Rarotonga. And so we have programs that meet their particular needs as well. One of the things we found with the classroom-based training is that it was particularly welcome because it gave people the opportunity to share their experiences in a non-sort of threatening environment, and to talk about lessons learned and that sort of thing. During COVID, we had to replace all of that with more webinar-based type format, which were well received. We had several hundred people would be attending some of our webinars. But of course, there was limited opportunity for that engagement apart from chat and putting Q&As and things like that. There wasn't the opportunity for the discussions that go on behind the scenes over the cup of coffee and the lunch break and everything else around people's experiences. And so we will continue doing what we're doing with the classroom-based thing, but we will be supplementing, we will be continuing with the webinars and things like that, because it's a very important way of also reaching out to the family members who are not necessarily able to attend our classroom-based training programs.
Thank you, Mark. I think this last point was particularly interesting. And of course, you as a government employer have the opportunity of reaching a broader audience in a sense, so not just your staff and soldiers, but also their families and spouses directly. So I think this is quite great. And I know in a sense that also the work that you, Rodney, do in the US is geared towards addressing social inequalities and racial inequalities through your work in the workplace. Would you like to share any insights on this?
Sure. I'm glad you brought that up because that was another trend that we saw not only with COVID, but here in the US 2 years ago with the George Floyd protest, the racial injustice protest that happened. Many companies committed more to address the racial wealth gap in this country, which is pretty significant. And recent surveys have shown it's actually getting worse and has gotten worse. And part of that is due to the pandemic. Therefore, what we have seen from employers are specific requests. What can we do? What tailored education we can have for those underserved populations? And what we've done is answered that call by providing education content that is geared to meet the needs of African American employees, of Hispanic employees, Asian American employees, women, LGBTQ+, realizing that the segments that I just mentioned were more adversely impacted by the pandemic. Many employees of color worked in fields such as in healthcare or in manufacturing, where in healthcare, some of the primary care physicians' offices saw less people because people didn't want to go into just for their regular checkup out of fear for COVID. So therefore they lost income and had to furlough people. Same thing in manufacturing we saw folks being furloughed. And once again, that had a bigger impact on those diverse populations. So it's important to realize that financial education can be a great way to address financial health inequities within your workforce. Earlier slide talked about, from one of the presenters, talked about the difference between men and women and gender in financial health and well-being, Professor Lizardi in her presentation. And we've seen that. And this is why we know women are more likely to be caregivers within their household, and therefore have different challenges related to being the caregiver, not only of children, but of elderly parents. Therefore, teaching and helping them and providing resources to help them understand what are some of the systems in place that can guide them and help them to overcome those challenges. So definitely, it's important to realize that, as someone said earlier, when it comes to financial education, financial well-being, one size does not fit all. And you need to have an understanding of who your workforce is and then deliver what they need when they need it.
Thank you very much, Rodney, for sharing these additional insights. And I would like to link to what you've been saying about social inequalities and go back to a topic that we mentioned at the beginning, which is changing labor patterns and new forms of employment, and turn the question to Stephanie. So from your research, from your experience, how are these changing labor patterns affecting the role of employers in the provision of retirement savings arrangements and also on financial education, if you know?
Yes, thank you. Well, indeed, there have been some big changes in the labor market that were previous to COVID-19, and actually COVID-19 exacerbated some of those trends. So, for example, there has been labor market transformations giving rise to an increased use of self-employment, but also temporary and part-time employment. And as Rodney was saying, actually, this may increase due to COVID because people are willing to change the way they work. And so this may develop further those non-standard forms of work, which means everything that is outside indefinite full-time employment relationship. And actually, the implication of these changing labor markets could be to undermine the role of the employer in the provision of retirement savings and also financial education potentially, because these changes have an implications on the role of the employers. If you take the self-employed, well, they are on their own. If you develop the role of employers to provide a retirement savings arrangement, then you need to develop other things for the self-employed, which are not relying on employers, obviously. And so we did some work back in 2020 on developing on approaches to motivate those self-employed workers to participate in retirement savings plans, and also ways to make sure that they contribute regularly, because those self-employed people, they don't necessarily have constant income, especially if we think about the gig workers. Their income is changing from day to day, week to week, month to month. So they need this flexibility in how they can contribute. So we have developed some approaches based on the OECD experiences. And when we look at the part-time and temporary employees here, the challenge is more related to the motivation for employers to provide retirement savings arrangements in the workplace. And many studies show that the main motivation for employers to provide those type of services is to attract and retain the best employees. And most of the time, this means putting a lot of effort on full-time permanent employees and much less on part-time and temporary employees. And also there are many studies, including in the US, showing that when we ask employers why they did not introduce a plan, they mention employee turnover as a result. So they don't want to invest too much on part-time and temporary employees. And if you have more and more of those, then this can be a problem. And we see that in a number of countries, the employers, when they set up an occupational pension plan, they can put some eligibility criteria based on income, based on working hours, based on the type of contract, and this tends to exclude those part-time and temporary employees. So here again, we need to make sure that the regulation avoids those discriminatory measures that will systematically disadvantage those non-standard forms of work that are part-time and temporary employees.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for providing this perspective. And I saw that both Mark and Rodney were nodding, so I would assume that this also applies to financial education, meaning that those who would perhaps need it the most, those who are in the most unstable or part-time or temporary positions, are also perhaps the ones least targeted by financial education, or the hardest to reach, of course. So let me check if any of you, including also Mariella and Michael, of course, if you have anything to add on this point, please just raise your hand or speak.
Sure. One of the things that I saw is that, to Stephanie's point about those other workers, those part-time workers, those gig workers, is companies realized that they had to do more to reach them with financial education. If for a lot of part-time workers, they don't have a corporate email address. So pushing information out to them, communications about a financial wellness program, can't happen through regular corporate means. So it has to happen maybe through their personal email address. If they are part of doing ride sharing service, and that's their employer, being able to reach them at a time that works. This is where digital comes in. But one of the things what we found in offering financial education in a digital means is that you also have to take into account what digital technology that particular employee may have at home. Maybe they don't, and I know, we saw this, maybe they don't have a laptop, a personal laptop or a personal computer. So you have to make sure that the services you're offering can also be done on a smartphone, because if they didn't have that, they may have had and usually had a smartphone. And this is what we realized. So you have to make sure that you're utilizing a mobile device enabled platform when you engage digitally. And as far as communications, another thing we found working with factory workers is that, once again, because they didn't have a corporate email address, old-fashioned paper, letting them know about this is the benefit, and this is how you log in, and this is how you access it, and these are when the seminar is going to be, and you can watch the replay on your own time at this, and by using this link. That proved more effective. That increased engagement, because once again, it was about meeting employees where they are. Mark, is there something I'm sure you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, again, totally agree with what you're saying, Rodney. So the government agency with whom we work is called the New Zealand Retirement Commission. And I know they do a lot of work in South Auckland and the Pacifica churches, because the Pacifica community tend to have a higher church going rate than for other parts of the New Zealand population. And so the Retirement Commission has been able to work with the churches to help with budgeting and financial management and financial capability training. And it also enables them to take into account their cultural norms and things when they're providing the training as well. And so we're very shortly going to be running a Pacifica pilot for our community, because we have quite a large Pacifica community within the armed forces. And so we're running a program for them with a Pacifica facilitator, with Pacifica cultural norms and things being applied, and doing reflecting what the Retirement Commission has been doing with the churches in South Auckland. And then within our Maori community, which is our indigenous people, we have what's called iwi, which is the local Maori infrastructure that often provides education and financial support for their local communities. And so I know, again, there's been work being done with iwi in different parts of the country around financial capability and budgeting and money mentoring and those sort of things, again, using Maori facilitators to help deliver these programs. And there's an element, I think there's been considerable success achieved with that, but there's obviously still more to be done, but we making a bit of progress.
Thank you, Mark. Let me check if Michael or Mariella also would like to react on this point.
Yes, maybe I can say something about these part-time employees. I mean, in the past we see it was an issue because mainly the training were at the end of the time work, you know, and not necessarily were all these people there. And of course, employers just prefer to train their whole employees instead of ones that were partially time work. Something that maybe affect also is that women were mainly part-time workers. So it was something that affected them as a whole. And it was, but I can say it was in the past, because currently the training were also, because of they are remote, I didn't see this last period that there were a division between the partial or the time part-time workers or the full-time workers. I don't know. You know, they were all invited, and you can have all this team, all these people receiving the training. What we saw is that it wasn't because it was partial or not, but we saw more men there. But I think it's mainly because of the economic situation. I mean, women stopped working on other work.
Thank you indeed, and thank you also for bringing up the gender dimension, which is of course very important and connected to all the issues we've been discussing. Sorry, Michael, anything else from you on this point? No. Okay, so in this case, I think we are approaching the end of our webinar, but I think we still have time for one round of questions. And so one of my questions was about how the content of financial education is changing, but I think most of you have somehow addressed this in your previous replies. So another topic that I wanted to explore with you is the one of delivery, how delivery is changing, and of course the role of digitalization. So somehow most of you have already mentioned the opportunities offered by digitalization in terms of allowing to reach in a more granular way employees, also perhaps in remote locations, but at the same time, not all industries or not all positions within a company may be easily reachable by digital means. So in a sense, this, as always, offers opportunities, but also challenges. So again, let me start by Mariella. So what challenges or opportunities are you experiencing with digital delivery?
Okay, I mean, we have to restructure all our programs. We have 4 modules in the past, 2 hours each, and we have to restructure because you cannot just keep 2 people 2 hours listening and paying attention about what you want to transfer. So we have to restructure it to 22 small courses for 40, 45 minutes, no more than that. And also we have to train our trainers and just develop to them new skills, how to train it virtually, because it's not the same. We have some experts just trying and moving around the room, trying to explain things. And then they are in front of a screen, trying to transmit the importance of financial education. You see, this is something that changed. About content, I mean, you have already said, we have to restructure them, prevention of digital fraud, personal finance. Maybe something that was important is that it was just not a personal personal finance, but also a family finance. We had the opportunity to sit to see how the whole family were sitting in front of the screen, and not just one person. It was a woman, actually children also were listening there. And it was a big opportunity to reach more people, to reach a whole family, because at the end we're all affected. And as mentioned before, to have allies in order to reach more people, it's important. Otherwise, I mean, I can say I trained 30,000 people, and looks quite a lot, but we have in Peru 30 million people. So, I mean, how many years I have to train in order to reach everybody here in my country. So I think it's important to reach, to have allies, and to increase our outreach. And I forgot the last things I wanted to say, maybe later.
Okay. Of course, if you have more insights, you can jump in at any time. So, Michael, I guess also you in the UK had to go digital, at least to some extent. So did you have any issues with this, or did it bring new opportunities?
I think overall it's bringing, obviously there are negative sides to it as well, but overall it's bringing opportunities. What we're noticing, a growing and emerging market trend in the UK is on in-app delivery of financial education, alongside real financial product information about how much income somebody has accrued within a pay period, how their savings are accumulating. So almost like a dashboard of information that is positioned alongside nudges towards financial education to help people hopefully make more informed and better financial decisions based on that dashboard of information. There's still a place for provision provided by public authorities. In our case, it would be the Money Helper Service in the UK. But what is really clear to us is that we must go to where workers are and where they are already accessing information, whether that be in these in-app services that employers are offering alongside fintech, workplace financial wellbeing providers, or it could be on employee benefits platforms. So any channel through which people are already there, rather than relying on them to come to us and seek the information in that way.
Okay, indeed. And Mark, so what is your experience in New Zealand with digital tools for financial education in the workplace?
I think two big issues. The first thing is everyone's time poor. And so even though we provide a lot of the training, we actually provide in work time at our expense and encourage people to participate. There's a reluctance on the part of some people to do it. It's whether they feel a bit overawed by it, they feel it doesn't meet their needs, they feel they don't need it, we're not sure. And so I think that's the first point. The second point is that with the digital based thing, it was very well received. And we did invite feedback from people after the session, and then what we endeavoured to do is to go back some months later to see whether there's actually been behavioural changes and things, and how cemented those are. But I do think there are some limitations to them, and I think going back to your point, Michael, as well around demographics, our organisation is made up of a military force for which the average age is about 26, 27, and then civilians like me for which the average age is mid-50s. We live in a different world, we communicate in a different world, and so again, it's how do you actually deliver programs that meet the requirements of both the demographic, basically, and that's a particular challenge as well. I'd just like to make a point about both Christian and Dora's presentations. I thought both of them were really great presentations. Our senior leadership team is very committed to our financial capability program. In fact, they've given us additional money this year to provide more. The challenge we face is actually the middle command chain or middle managers, getting them to free the soldier, the sailor, the Air Force personnel up to actually attend the training, and that's where we find that we have particular difficulties, and combined with a reluctance on the part of some people to attend as well. So there's ongoing work that we have to do around explaining and demonstrating the benefits of people actually attending the financial capability training, whether it's classroom-based or a webinar format or however else it's done.
Thank you very much. And so I will leave the final word to Rodney. So you have already mentioned before the importance of reaching employees where they are and with the tools that would be most effective for them. But do you have anything to add on the right mix between digital or hybrid or traditional modes of delivery?
Yeah, you know, what was interesting is that transitioning to digital, we saw increased attendance at seminars. But similar to what Mark had talked about is we didn't see the crosstalk that results in learning from peers. So people that raise their hand and said, oh, wow, well, you just talked about this. You know, I actually experienced that. There is learning that can be had not only from the instructor, but from that peer-to-peer interaction. To some extent, it happens in the chat, but this is also another thing that we saw is that when you're in the room, the instructor after the class, and if you've been to financial education, a lot of people will go up one-on-one and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you, pull you to the side. You don't have that opportunity. So what we did is we created the opportunity. We sent out links afterwards. Hey, if you want to continue the conversation with the instructor, here's the link, click it. What time would you like? And that person, the instructor, is going to reach out to you. We found that really helped to continue the conversation. So you have to be a little creative to create that in-person environment in a digital space is what we found.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. I think we all have to learn on this creativity point. So I think we have come to the end of our time. And so I will thank very warmly Mariella, Mark, Rodney, and Michael for sharing, and Stephanie for sharing these insights. It's been extremely enriching. And I will then pass on to Florent for closing remarks. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Chiara. And let me as well thank very much the panelists of this session, as well as the previous session. I think it's been a very rich webinar. We had 200 participants, and it was really good to hear from the various experience from the policy side, but also from the private sector side, from the research side with Professor Anna-Maria Rissardi. And before giving, a few kind of ideas on wrap up, I also would like to thank very much the OECD team led by Chiara, and also, of course, Sona, who was instrumental in developing the policy handbook, and Stephanie on the pension side, who joined us today. So just to say that it was quite clear, and I was making some notes throughout the webinar, that this topic of financial education and workplace is certainly becoming an area of growing interest from the policy perspective, from the private sector as well. I believe that indeed financial literacy and the workplace have been transformed through the pandemic, and they are both at the very core of consumer vulnerabilities and inequalities. And this was raised on and on in this last panel, how financial literacy and the workplace have been really central to social inequality, maybe racial inequality, gender inequality. We've also seen that there are inequalities related to the status, the work status, obviously, whether people are working part-time, what has been the industry they are working in, what is the sector. So certainly a really growing interest, especially as consumers and employees are under financial stress, where financial resilience is an issue for many of them, and where policymakers and also employers of different kinds are wondering how to ensure performance, to ensure financial resilience, and to basically make sure that the economy is working. What was also very clear is that when we talk about financial literacy and the workplace, we are really looking at a holistic approach, and it's been mentioned on and on. We are not focusing only on one small area of personal finance, that could be debt or pension in the past, but really looking at financial wellness and whole the different financial aspect of an employee, of his family, and of his personal situation. And why is that? It's because, there's been a number of research, and I think this webinar and the policy handbook is really helping in really highlighting that, is that financial stress has negative impact on performance. So certainly it is something that is of interest for policymakers, but also for employers. At the same time, the webinar and the policy handbook is really stressing that we need more and more data and evidence. As in any policy field, we need to understand what will be useful, what are the needs of employees. And here it was mentioned again, and I like to repeat that, there is no one size fits all when it comes to improving one person's situation. We know that there are different types of workers, that some are more vulnerable than others, and some may have different needs in terms of financial literacy. At the same time, we also heard that employers also needs to be surveyed in a sense in order to make sure that we understand that challenge when it comes to potentially providing financial literacy or financial well-being resources to their employees. What is important to keep in mind is that, in a sense, financial literacy in the workplace is a win-win situation. And I think it's an important message to convey that, of course, it will be beneficial to employees and consumers in the end. And I would like to insist on employees of all types, and certainly the case of part-time workers or those that are more vulnerable need to be handled and tackled in one way or the other. But it also, of course, a kind of, there's spillover positive effect on employees as well if it is done well. And as was mentioned by some of you, it is one of the ways through which employers are trying to keep talent or attract talent. Important, like any policy field, we see that partnership and coordination is critical. Of course, partnership and coordination between policymakers and employers, but actually a wide range of other civil stakeholders were actually mentioned in the webinar today, and are mentioned also in the policy handbook. Trade unions, chamber of commerce, churches were also mentioned. And of course, when I mean employers, I'm also thinking of public and private employers. Another important message is that when it's done well, and I think it's true for any policy field, financial literacy in the workplace can work and really improve the financial well-being of employees, but also improve their performance. What is important is that, as always, the devil lies in the detail. It needs to be timely, right channels needs to be used, right messages that are really the kind of message that people need in their current situation is really important. And here, one of Kiara's last question was around COVID and digitalization. And I think what we heard is that, in a sense, digitalization helped to reach out perhaps more easily to wider range of audiences. But at the same time, there are a number of challenges that we need to address when it comes to digitalization. First, not all types of industries and sector can really use these devices. Second, of course, some employees, and especially those that are more vulnerable, may not be that easily reachable with digitalization. So important perhaps to mix the format in order to make sure that we are reaching out to those that most need it. Last but not least, of course, financial literacy in the workplace can help with financial resilience, with financial well-being, but we all know that it is not necessarily the silver bullet, and that regulation, of course, may be needed as well. Always an important message, and this is why it was important for us to also bring along our work on pension, for example, which is one part of personal finance. I'd like to conclude to say that the OECD remains very committed, of course, on those issues, in collecting and gathering evidence on financial literacy, in developing policy recommendation and policy support, but also to partner with a different range of stakeholders. They may be public, private, or civil society. Ultimately, we're here to support better lives, especially for consumers. We hope that the policy handbook will be used. So that's the main goal of launching it today, is to make sure that there is a wide dissemination of the policy handbook. And I would encourage you to not only read it, but use it and also disseminate it through any means that you have. Last but not least, of course, I'd like to thank all the participants, speakers, moderators, and also encourage you to participate in our evaluation poll. You've seen this up at the beginning of my closing, so please fill it in. We are eager to make sure that financial literacy works, but also to make sure that our webinar are useful to all of you. With this, I would like to conclude this webinar. Thank you all. Wish you all a very good day, especially if you've woken up very early to be with us. Special thanks to the early riser in the US, and perhaps actually for those that are late in the night in New Zealand, or early morning as well. Thank you all, and see you all hopefully at some point in person. I wish you a great end of the week. Bye-bye.